conflicts that are arising from the local area. So, please, we just want you to say, do you think your message or your lecture has not been reached by the governors in order to curtail this incessant crisis around the border areas in the local government areas? Because this thing has become a recurring decimal. And you say that most of the crises are from the local area, and they are not from the cities. And these governors are aware. Don't you think they are aware in order to curtail the security agencies? That's just one thing.
I don't think it's about them not being aware or not being
Yes, sir.
willing. I think that you have to look at the size of the country. Nigeria is a very large country. We're talking about 774
Local
local
government.
government areas. And those are just the local government areas. There are thousands of communities, tens of thousands of communities, thousands of wards. So there's a lot of ground to cover. So having this meeting, for example, is a sign of the commitment of this National Assembly, the Senate Committee, to interrogate these issues deeply and provide resources where those resources are necessary to solve this problem. But the problem cannot be solved from the top. You solve it from the bottom, which is why you have representatives of state governments here and I believe even local governments as well.
What do you suggest for the implementations of all these things? What do you suggest? What are your suggestions?
The
The steps
mechanisms,
that
the
is
mechanisms already exist. You have the National Boundary Commission at the federal level. You have state boundary committees at the state level. You have the local boundary committees at the local government level. So what needs to happen is the full-scale activation of those committees at the state level and at the local government level. The National Boundary Commission is up and doing, but it cannot do it alone. It needs the support of the state entities and the local government entities.
Sir, your name, sir?
Chris Ugodo.
Thank you, sir.
So I was asked to speak on adopting early warning and response systems in boundary management in Nigeria. So I will keep this very brief. I will not use the slides so much. I will go straight to the point. When we discuss insecurity in Nigeria, it's important for us to recognize that insecurity in Nigeria is currently and predominantly a rural phenomenon. Nigeria is 46% rural. Much of the insecurity that we are seeing is happening in the rural interior, rural areas, far away from state capitals, far away from local government headquarters. These are places that suffer from lack of infrastructure, lack of a formal government footprint, lack of security assets. So these places are places that we've come to refer increasingly to as ungoverned areas. Now, in the rural interior, in the rural interior, where these conflicts predominate, it's important to stress that I'm not saying that there is no insecurity in urban areas. I'm saying that when we talk about mass casualty events, mass atrocities, large-scale violence, this happens predominantly, in fact, almost entirely in the rural communities. Now, within these rural communities, we can further narrow down and say that a lot of these events have to do with land disputes, land conflicts particularly over land. A lot of these land conflicts can be traced directly to lack of clarity of delineation of communal boundaries, ward boundaries, village boundaries, and even interstate boundaries. So that brings us squarely to the topic that we are discussing. Now, when we talk of early warning, the point of early warning is simply to gather enough data for us to be able to anticipate risk and therefore deploy preventive measures. I think much of the problems we've had with traditional boundary management or the management of boundary conflicts are that the approaches have been reactive. Usually we are dealing with issues after the violence has already happened. We are either deploying security interventions or we are looking for judicial interventions, in which case the violence has already happened, which is simply not adequate. What early warning is meant to do is to give us the tools with which to prevent these things from escalating. In other words, to prevent disputes, even where there are disputes, where there are tensions, we want to prevent them from escalating into open violence. Now, some of the major early warning indicators around boundary conflicts include displacement of population, so population displacement, when people move from one place to another. This is happening increasingly in the northwest, in the northeast, and even in parts of the south-south. We are seeing a lot of these displacements, often as a result of conflict or or as a result of climate change related phenomena. We also have a situation where the discovery of natural resources is often an indicator of impending conflict, ultimately. This is very important because currently there is a lot of emphasis on solid minerals, especially in the North Central and in the Northwest. And we are seeing a situation where, as these minerals become more strategic and more valuable to us, contestations over ownership of these minerals will lead to boundary conflicts, especially between states and between communities. We've already seen this happen in some instances where it pertains to crude oil deposits, particularly in the South-South, whether between Akwa Ibom and Cross River or between Abia and the neighboring states. We expect that given the current trajectory, this kind of conflict, this kind of contestation will become more and more common. The other indicator is the destruction of boundary markers or beacons, where communities, members of communities intentionally, willfully destroy boundary markers or beacons, often as a result of the tensions arising between these two groups. People are trying to either take land that doesn't belong to them, or they contest the definition of the boundaries as they are currently understood. In terms of recommendations for dealing with this, the first is to recognize that while this problem is situated largely in the rural areas, the Land Use Act has a dichotomy within it that is very important for us to understand. Under the Land Use Act, custodianship of land is vested in the state government, but it is specifically urban land that is vested in state governments. It is non-urban land that is vested in the local government. So this is why this is a big part of the recommendations for dealing with this have to be strengthening of local governance, strengthening of the local government authority, because constitutionally they are the entities that are best positioned to address these issues. The second is the boundary governance architecture in Nigeria follows our federal system. It is a three-tier system, as you are all aware. So we have the National Boundary Commission, but we have the state boundary committees and the local boundary committees. In many states, the state boundary committees are not functional, and the local boundary committees are less than functional. This is not an ideal situation. So in order to address this situation, we need full-scale activation of both state boundary committees and local boundary committees. Thirdly, we need GIS-based mapping of land. That is GIS-based mapping of land, registration of claims on land. This will be very tedious, but it is really the only way to sort out contesting claims over land ownership in rural areas, a lot of which is driving conflicts in these places. Maralasa have mentioned a lot of this already. I will not bother repeating his points. Fourthly, the National Boundary Commission is the lead agency for dealing with issues of boundary management, boundary governance, and even managing conflicts arising from contestations and boundaries. It needs funding, it needs resourcing, and fifthly, we need to integrate early warning and early response into boundary management processes across all tiers, from the national to the state to the local. Thank you very much, Mr.